my favorite part.
Okay, I'll call the meeting of the Morgantown Planning Commission to order. Does anybody want me to read the pre-meeting announcement? Okay, first thing on the agenda is general public comments. Any public comments for matters that are not on the agenda? Okay, so we'll move on to matters of business. Meeting minutes from February 9th, 2023.
Move to approve as presented. Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor? It's unanimous, what's here, I don't know.
Mr. President, if I may, on item B, can we also add a study session agenda from March 9th as well?
Sure.
Included with the minutes for March 19th.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is meeting minutes from March 9th, 2023, including the study session.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second, all in favor?
I think there's one edit.
Okay. What you got?
It says call to order, Mr. DeMaster.
I
He
did
wasn't
not.
there.
I did not call anything to order on March 9th, I can tell you that.
That would have been impossible.
I may have ordered something, but I didn't call
We
anything to
will
order.
strike you from.
Okay.
That's it.
I forget who ran the meeting.
Yeah, it
Do you
was me.
recall who?
Mr. Petros.
Mr. Petros, Dr. Petros, thank you.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
Okay, do I have another motion with that change?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor? And I will abstain. Is that enough if I abstain?
Yes.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor,
Yes, sir.
how did you vote? Sorry.
In favor.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to unfinished business TX 22-01, protect Morgantown firearm sales establishment.
So, Mr. President and Commissioners, if you may have a look from the screens here tonight, you also have a slide deck in front of you as well as your staff report.
So the slide deck is the same as the staff report, it's just horizontal, right?
Or is it that?
It's compressed, so it's not as much text, more of just the highlights.
Okay, great,
Yep.
thank you.
So what's up on the screen is the text amendment presented by Protect Morgantown. Obviously, they were requesting to establish a new firearm sales establishment use. And you can see the proposed zoning districts in which that would be permitted by conditional use in a B1, B2, and permitted by right in a B5.
So excuse me, Mr. Ricky, so this is a text amendment to the zoning ordinance, right?
This is the text amendment,
Okay.
correct. Since the application to amend the city's zoning ordinance was submitted in June of 2022, the Planning Commission held 3 meetings on the matter. The first was a public hearing on August 11th, 2022, at which time discussion was had and ultimately the matter was tabled for further research and consideration. The Planning Commission also hosted 2 workshop or study sessions on January 12th and March 9th of 2023. And in the last study session, staff had presented a proposal, and that was amended somewhat, which we'll get into in a minute for your consideration this evening. So in terms of the staff proposal per the Commission's request, 1, modify Section 1329 of the City's Planning and Zoning Code to include the following definitions. Firearm sales establishment means an establishment engaged in the sale, manufacture for sale, rent, lease, purchase, or repair of firearms, ammunition, and ammunition components, period. That was a change from a previous definition that included hunting and sporting goods. And then to follow, if an establishment is engaged in the activities described herein, the establishment shall not be deemed to constitute any other use for the purpose of determining whether land use is permitted with the city and any applicable conditions or limitations. The next item of discussion in terms of definitions was firearm. There was some discussion at the end of the workshop about whether air guns or air cannons would be included in that. And so after consulting with our city attorney, we found that the definition that's in state code was unclear. And so if the commission wants to clarify either way, this is the proposed language. So I'll read the definition, alternative 1. Firearm means any weapon which will expel a projectile by action of an explosion and excludes any instrument or device, including any spring, rubber, or mechanical device, or compressed air cartridge, for impelling the force, any pellet, shell, cartridge for or ball or cartridge which will eject the same from such instrument, provided that it does not mean an antique firearm as defined, and then there's the code reference from state code. Alternatively, it's the same definition, but it says includes. So if the commission tonight wants to move forward with this new use and including the clarifying definitions, if air guns is something that wants to be included in that, we would go with alternative 2. Alternative 1 would exclude that.
So, if I understand it, and I don't know, but alternative 2 that would include it, the way you're talking about it, would that be a BB gun? So a BB gun would be included in a firearm?
Includes any instrument or device, including any spring, rubber, or mechanical device or compressed air cartridge
Okay.
for impelling with force.
Okay.
Wasn't there a third alternative in the staff report? Did you delete the third alternative?
Not for this definition.
Okay, thank you.
I hate to go backwards, but I would ask a question. I'm going back to the English issue on the first sentence up there under firearms establishments.
Yes.
Should the and ammunition components be or ammunition components? Because if it says and at the end, that means it includes everything in that sentence to be defined as an establishment, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So the and should be changed to an or?
I think so.
I think so.
So alternatively, then, this would include if a store is only selling ammunition, then that's included in this definition then, correct?
Right, yes.
And if a store is just selling black powder, it would be included.
As an ammunition component, yes.
Okay. And then the definition of antique firearm, A, B, and C, those come directly from state code. No changes were made there. 2, to modify table 133105, the permitted land use table. So the new use that's proposed would be permitted by conditional use in the B2 and by right in the B5 only. And here again in your packet, and I'm sorry it's dark on the screen, but you can see where the B2 and B5 districts are located in the city, primarily along our major commercial thoroughfares and commercial corridors in the community, as well as near the Interstate 68. And 3, modify table 136504, minimum off-street parking requirements. And this was that our team came up with in order to address the parking issue. And so the minimum number of required parking spaces shall be determined by referencing the type of retail establishment that most closely aligns with the operational characteristics of the subject firearm sales establishment use. The reference retail category shall be of similar retail nature and may include, but not limited to, sporting goods stores, pawn shops, or other similar retail establishments. So in terms of location where it's permitted, you would look at the firearm sales establishment use. When it comes to determining what the parking requirement is for that use, you would refer to what the subsequent use is, as defined here. And that's all I have.
Director Yeager, can I ask a question for a point of clarification?
Yes, ma'am.
Nothing that, my screen is not changing, I'm still just seeing the planning commission, home screen, I guess. So nothing has changed since you made the packet for the commissioners, right?
Correct. Though, yeah, correct.
Okay, I studied that, I just wanted to make sure that everything is still the same and nothing had changed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, can we go back to these alternative definitions, Mr. Chairman, and maybe pick from these two? Or at least discuss.
I think we have to.
I mean, alternative one is turgid. I mean, it's not, I think it needs to be edited just for syntax to make it, I mean, our objective should be that people can read this and understand it
Absolutely.
and not have to hire a lawyer, much as I hate to say that, but.
It's fine with me.
So, with that caveat, I would prefer alternative one to exclude those relatively inert categories.
And I'm leaning toward alternative one also. So, this is kind of strange the way we're doing this, because we have the two different alternatives. We're gonna vote on these piecemeal, which alternative we choose, and then we have the text amendment, which also has alternatives, right?
Pardon me?
We have the text amendment, which also has alternatives, right?
It does not. This was the
This is
proposal
the-
by
this is the
staff
only
after the
alternative, okay.
workshop, right? So modification 1, 2, and 3. The discussion would be, and if I make that in form of the motion, that you would, for instance, if it was the will of the commission to move forward with modification or staff proposal 1 with the modification, maybe perhaps that Mr. Petros put forward, and then include in that motion alternative 1's language. Or 2.
I'm happy to cooperate, Ricky, but this is not our job to draft proposals. I mean, we can help here and weigh in, but as I understand it, our job tonight is to determine whether the proposed text amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
And then the city code also says we report to council, and I'm not sure
Correct.
what that means. It's not really defined in the code, but having said all that, Mr. President, my motion is that we adopt alternative 1 definition with the caveat that the syntax may be improved, but the substance would remain the same.
Okay, there's a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay, a motion and a second. Does anybody want to discuss anymore? Okay, all in favor? I don't know what Danielle did.
Deputy Mayor, how do you vote?
Yes,
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so now this, with number 1, modifying 1329, the firearm sales establishment, then definition of firearms, alternative 1, these are the text amendments we're voting on tonight, right?
Yes.
And then the parking as well, right?
Yeah, I was going to put them all in one package, but we can,
And no, I'm sorry, I'm stepping on your channel. We'll proceed how you prefer. I mean, that'd be
that's
great.
fine. I mean, you already voted for modification 1, so that's
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Do we want, was there any revisit of the and/or?
I think we decided it should be or.
That's what I have, just
Yeah,
wanted to
we
make
voted
sure.
on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Because I think the motion was with the change. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yep. And then for second consideration will be modified table 133105.
And that makes it a conditional use in B2 and a permitted use in B5.
That is correct.
And the blank spots means it's not permitted anywhere else.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody want to have any discussion on this?
I think that's the proposal that was put forth all
Yes, sir.
along, right? Yeah.
Okay. So then do I have a motion? And to be clear, our motions, because these are text amendments, to be clear, our motions are to send a recommendation to city council that they approve this, because we're not approving any specific, we can't.
Well, I think we have to find whether this is consistent with the comprehensive plan, which means it's consistent with the law
Yes.
as the predicate issue. And then again, there's that issue about reporting to city council in the code that I don't really understand. That's different than the state code. But anyway, I think the planner's got a method to present here, right? You're
Yeah,
gonna-
if this would move, it would be one ordinance with those 3 text amendments
Okay.
in them.
And I think what we're doing is we're talking about generally which we prefer, and then we're gonna have to, granted, we already kind of voted, but we're gonna have to get public comment.
Yes, and then I think
But
we
we're-
need to
but
vote on the
we're-
larger issue.
Yeah, but we're picking which alternatives we want.
There's no alternatives on number 2 here.
There is no,
It
sir.
is what it is.
Correct.
Okay.
And you got another one, right?
Yeah, and then,
Oh,
sorry, that was 2, and then 2 was the antique firearm definition, and 3 was the minimum off-street parking requirements.
Okay. And there's no alternative here either, right?
No, sir.
So essentially what this is doing is making the off-street parking requirements sort of comparable to similar
Uses,
uses.
right.
I think
Other than trying to determine
that's a
what.
practical approach.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's no choices there. Okay, so what I would ask you to do before we do public comment, because the only thing we had choices on was alternative 1 versus 2, in case anybody wants to comment, if you would put that back up there. Anybody else have any discussion on the 3 different things we've talked about? Okay, is there any member of the public who would like to speak in favor of this text amendment or discuss any of the alternatives?
Hi, Commissioners, thank you. Ricky, good to see you. I'm Shay Strait. I'm the agent helping protect Morgantown and helping to represent them on the matter. And we do support the proposed text amendments, especially with all the wonderful recommendations that staff has thoroughly researched and offered, and that you all have discussed over nearly the past year on the matter, and especially the latest ones that are being proposed here about excluding things such as air rifles and so forth, which are generally regarded as more recreational type uses and are not as typically as much of a concern about safety or perception of safety for the members of the public as well. So we are in favor of this and believe that it would benefit the community of Morgantown. Thank you.
Anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of the text amendment?
Good evening. Once again, my name is Jody Hollingshead. I am the founder of Protect Morgantown, and I just wanted to say how much I appreciate all of the consideration and time that's gone into this text amendment. We're excited that it's gotten to this point, and as Shay said, as a group, as an organization, the community in general supports this text amendment along with the recommendations that we've come up with over the past year. There's a myriad of reasons this zone code amendment should become law, but I'd like to focus on the psychological impact of allowing firearms retailers to open in and near Morgantown's downtown and residential areas. Downtown Morgantown is our city's only pedestrian-oriented business district, and I see the work being done by our community members and by the city government to restore and retain downtown's inviting atmosphere. Colorful murals, the city ambassador program, street fairs, etc., all evidence that many of us share the common goal of Morgantown's downtown district being a vibrant, charming, and welcoming destination for residents and visitors to stroll and enjoy everything it has to offer. Morgantown is also lucky to have several commercial centers situated away from residential and pedestrian-oriented areas. These areas require automobile transport and often serve customers who are shopping for specific items, as opposed to downtown, where folks tend to peruse out for a day of enjoyment rather than errands. As for residential areas, it doesn't make good sense for the community or firearms businesses to open near these districts. Prohibiting firearm sales near neighborhood districts ensures they remain inviting, safe, and safe-seeming places to current and future residents. These mindsets are important to consider as we thoughtfully develop our city, as you know. The psychological impact of having firearms retailers in areas where people go to explore and enjoy Morgantown is undoubtedly negative, especially given the increasing gun-related deaths in our country. Gun violence awareness has never been higher, and as people consider Morgantown for a place to send their children to college, a place to open their future businesses, a place to live, we want to be thoughtful about the impact our land use has. For the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and visitors of Morgantown. I ask that you favorably forward this amendment to the City Council. Thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of the text amendment?
Yes, hi gentlemen. Just briefly, my name is Reverend Zach Morton. I serve First Presbyterian Church here downtown, also part of an interfaith group. And do want to just point out that this sort of thing does send an impactful message for a lot of our smaller religious communities of faith to help them feel a little bit more safe. We're certainly not at a point in our prevailing society when we can assume that everybody is as safe as we assumed we were 10, 15 years ago. And while regulations on firearm sales don't guarantee everything, they do send an important message. I've had a number of conversations with folks from our local synagogue who have already had to, have safety concerns and change their practices over the last few years. And they are very much in favor of this sort of thing as well as some of our other smaller religious groups. So that is always a concern in the back of people's minds now. Having a text like this really does help and send a good message that the city is thinking of them. So thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of the text amendment? Anyone who'd like to speak in opposition to the text amendment? Okay. Any motions?
We're gonna get a staff recommendation.
Oh yeah, I guess we can do staff recommendations.
If the commission desires to create a new firearm sale establishment use in the city zoning code, please consider forwarding the proposal as discussed to city council for consideration.
Okay, now any motions?
Well, I'm reticent to any time to use the power of the government to tell people what they can and can't do with their property. And, you may not care, but the people that invested in Morgantown and built that building that was proposed for the gun store, that property is still vacant. So somebody's suffering, and whether it's corporation, and ultimately somebody's made an investment in Morgantown and hasn't been realized because of public pressure. And that's a tough thing, and using the government's even tougher. And with all due respect to the Reverend, sending a message is an admirable goal, but not one that we're allowed to do under the law. We have to regulate for a permissible reason. And I want to underscore Ms. Hollingshead's comments about the psychological impact. When we talk about public health, we talk about public mental health as well. And the fear, the concern. I was driving my son to Trinity. I love to do that because we talk the whole time. And the morning after the Nashville horror came, the story came on the radio, and he just went quiet, didn't say a word. And that's, I think, indicative of where his head is, and we've talked later about it. The fear. So what can we do? In light of the feckless federal and state legislatures on this issue, we can all do what we can do, which is regulate for the public health. And that's what we're doing here, regulating for the public health. So I strongly support these text amendments, and I also believe that because they are supportive and promotive of the public health, they're consistent with the comprehensive plan. So my motion is to forward this with a recommendation to City Council as both desirable, in the best interest of the city, and also as consistent with the comprehensive plan. So I'll make that in the form of a motion.
And that is with alternative one, yes?
With as edited.
Correct.
And again, I think alternative one needs a little bit of fixing. It's hard to read right now. I've got a suggestion.
10 for it.
Okay, there's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion?
And I just add one thing. I would remind, the deputy mayor made a great point last time we discussed this about we regulate other activities by location as well. Plenty of things.
Yes.
So there's precedent here, as she pointed out last time.
Absolutely. We regulate in our downtown whether you're allowed to have a dog groomer or a greenhouse. Different areas are appropriate for different things. And I think that this is consistent with the precedent that we have set. Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Strega.
Can I get a second?
She gave.
Oh, got
Oh,
a
there was a
second?
second. I just want to know if there was any other discussion. Because you keep looking like you want to say something.
Well, I kind of, you know,
I
this
would
has
like
been a
to hear-
long process.
I would like to hear your thoughts
This has
on
been a
it.
long process, and I'm grateful that we had a data-driven debate on it, on, you know, what are the realities, and there was a lot of things that were put out that weren't realities that we had to consider. And, you know, what are the realities of doing this and what that's going to imply? Is this going to imply that Morgantown's a safer place? Maybe, but not necessarily. Can we regulate businesses as far as what fits where in what zones? Absolutely. And I think that's why I'm supportive of this, because we're regulating it based on the types of businesses going where. I'm not supporting it based on the fact that I think it's going to solve a problem in Morgantown, because I just don't think it's that proximity related based on the data that we've tried to derive from the literature and reviewed here. So.
I think those are excellent points, Dr. Petros. The one thing I would say and ask you to think about is we are solving a problem, and that problem is that whether it's the anxiety, is the fear, is what the Surgeon General calls a crisis in youth mental health that we're going through right now. So I don't suppose, and I agree, this is not going to make it any more or less likely that something terrible is going to happen. But what it will do is, hopefully, is make people feel more secure and relax perhaps a bit. So those are important things.
And the only thing I want to say is I want to echo what Dr. Petros said. When this first came to us, we could have done a natural knee-jerk reaction, let's just do something. But instead we studied it, we got the data. If you look at it, the changes we made are somewhat anticlimactic. They're not big, massive changes, but they're changes based on the data that we had and a careful study. And I'm glad that the commission was willing to do that. I'm glad that the public was willing to let us do that and not, keep on us, let's do something, and wanted to make sure we did it right.
Well said, Mr. President. And I would add the staff, Mr. Yeager did an excellent job, and I thank Mr. Straight and Ms. Hollingshead as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, you want to have a vote now?
Call the question.
All in favor of to recommending the text amendment to City Council?
And finding it consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Anybody opposed? I couldn't hear what she said, so.
She said aye.
Okay. So next item on the agenda is RZ 23-03 Heritage Professional Building Association, 1197, 1199 Van Voris.
Just a question, Deputy Mayor, can you still see the slides progressing now?
I see case number R22303.
You got it. All right. So again, we'll go from the slide deck here. The applicant is here, so if you have any questions after the presentation. The applicant is here requesting a zoning map amendment to 7 parcels, 6 commercial office condominiums, and the surface parking lot that's shown here on your slide. And there's a picture of the office building there at Killarney Avenue and Van Boris Road. You can see in these 2 maps and in your packet the existing zoning where this is pro in the green, which is, and then the proposed rezoning, which I also included the 2 that are pending council consideration. Planning Commission approved parcels 92 or made a recommendation to council to move forward and approve the rezoning of parcels 92 and 93, and those are pending public hearing and second reading next week. And then you can see how that would play out if all of those were to be rezoned there. And you can hear in context of the across the street, or the east side of Van Voorhis Road, is the general commercial district for West Run and the unincorporated portion of the county. And if we look towards the comprehensive plan, as you can see, the area that's kind of got the red box, that's identified as potential infill and growth, and that's along that Van Voorhis corridor from Burroughs to just south of Southview and the Clearview Street just to the north of that, I believe. This is a picture or a map of from the land management plan, the character area map, and it shows that this location is identified as a neighborhood 2 district, and the definition of that part of the plan is in your packet. And then the third map shows here the land management plan. So looking forward, it's identified as a corridor enhancement, and that's that area shaded there again in the light pink color. And when we look at the appropriate development types, based on the comprehensive plan and the corridor enhancement area, multifamily residential, civic and institutional, neighborhood center mixed use, community commercial, office research, and green space are all considered appropriate types, again taking into consideration the pattern and character map. After review, the proposed zoning map amendment for parcels 224 through 224.6 appear to be consistent with the regional vision, conceptual growth framework, and land management plan described in the 2013 comprehensive plan update, and more specifically, the proposed zoning change and permitted conditional uses associated therewith are in keeping with the regional vision to further capture growth in the city's corporation limits. The intersection of Van Voorhis Road and Chestnut Ridge Road and Burroughs Street represent a major node in the community, and there are regulatory zoning controls in place to buffer commercial development uses from the existing single-family neighborhoods per the parking and landscaping buffer requirements in the code. And that's all I have, sir.
Okay, the petitioner's here.
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Matt Gutta. I am the attorney for the Heritage Professional Building Association. The stakeholders or the owners of that association are Gutta Enterprises, of which I am a part owner, and Montague County Health Systems, so Mon General Hospital, or now Vandalia Health. That specific building is comprised of 6 office condominium units, 4 of which are owned by Montague Health Systems, and 2 of which are owned by Gutta Enterprises. We are essentially facing a significant hardship in regards to the marketability of that particular building, due in part to the zoning restrictions that we are dealing with there. Particularly in regards to Mon Health. Mon Health, to just give you a little historical background, Mon Health purchased their 4 office condominium units out of that building from Wedgwood Family Practice in 2018. They marketed that space for sale and or lease in 2018. Sat empty for 2 years. Very reasonable, very rational seller, being Mon Health, easy to work with, easy to negotiate with. Sat on the market for 2 years. COVID hit, and we're getting through COVID, and we're out of COVID, and here we are in 2023. That space has sat empty for now 5 years. Likewise, we are getting ready, our 2 office condominiums, we are getting ready to lose a tenant there. That building will be about 90% empty. The second hardship we're facing, and in the name of progress, this is a good thing, this is a good problem to have, is the condemnation proceedings that are going to occur from the state of West Virginia to expand Van Voorhis Road. That is a good thing, right? We all understand that these types of give and take scenarios are very important for the growth of our community. However, with respect to that, we are going to lose 25% of our parking at that building. We are actually going to lose, if you look at the aerial, if I might point out here, when the lane is expanded into the parking lot and through the George's property here, we will lose this entire front half of the parking lot to that building. every prospective tenant, every prospective purchaser that has come along our way in the last 3 years that is aware of this has absolutely just turned away because of, number one, the fact that it will be a construction zone for about a year, and number two, for the fact that our parking is going to be reduced by about 25% for that building. Historically, that building was built in 1985. The majority of that building was used for office medical purposes. Dr. Houston's rheumatology office and Wedgwood Family Practice. Medical offices are very, very, very dependent upon significant parking. Mon General has had a very difficult time soliciting a medical tenant for that space because of the challenges that we are going to face with the reduction in the parking. We're essentially seeking zoning reclassification basically to provide us a little bit of relief. We've had some prospective tenants that are interested in putting boutiques, retail boutiques in there. If you look at the nature of the building, I'll just kind of show you, just draw your attention. If you look at the design and the construction of the building, I mean, it's a more traditional colonial style building. It doesn't really suit the traditional retail model. That being said, there are some, we have had some interest from some parties that would be interested in putting some nice, we had a children's clothing boutique and actually a small children's furniture boutique that was interested in the space, but precluded due to our zoning requirements, and we've had some other prospective tenants. However, we're essentially hamstrung at this point. There is an asset there that has been sitting mostly empty for 5 years now, not generating B&O taxes, not generating employment within the city limits. If I were to come to you after 6 months of a vacancy, that would be a bit premature. If I were to come to you after a year of vacancy, I would even say maybe that's a bit premature. I'm coming to you after 5 years of vacancy. Again, with very rational, reasonable owners, willing to work, willing to negotiate with anything, and it's nearly impossible in the current market with the office market the way it is. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. Any concerns that any of the residents would have about that zoning reclassification? I'll give you a little different history. My grandfather, Frank Gutta, son of an Italian immigrant, bought his first piece of equipment when he was 16 years old, and he built almost every single house in the Virginia Manor neighborhood on Killarney Drive and Colonial Drive in the 1950s and the 1960s. Subsequently, my father built this building, Heritage Apartments. I have the utmost respect for the integrity of this building and the integrity of that neighborhood. So you're looking at the third generation that has a stake in this. We are simply trying to carry forward and preserve the integrity of the neighborhood. A lot of times, some purposes behind zoning reclassifications. A lot of neighbors don't like that. I can ensure you those concerns don't fall. You shouldn't have those fall on your shoulders with me or with Mon Health. The B1 zoning classification does not permit office medical use, so that's why we have sought B2 zoning classification. And let's see here. Does the commission have any questions for me?
I will in a minute. I want to ask him a question.
Sure.
First. Difference in parking requirements between Pro and B1 or B2. Are there any?
It's based on the use.
Okay.
And so it's governed by what uses are permitted.
Okay. Difference in building envelope and size for Pro and B2.
Building height is larger.
How much larger?
I'd have to go back. It's probably 75 foot tall.
Okay, so if this changes to B2, you could build up to 75 feet tall there.
There is a maximum height requirements in that area,
Yeah.
but again, that would be based then on the parking standards, right? So if,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, and I understand that there's only just so much land to work with. I understand that.
right.
Now the question for you.
Sure.
Heritage Professional Building Association, is that an LLC that is partially owned by you and Mon Health?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're here representing the building association, so Mon
That-
Health is
I'm
on
not a
board with this?
direct representative of Mon Health, but I'm a representative of the association of which Mon Health is an owner.
But they know what you're doing and they're.
That is correct,
Okay.
yes. I should have preempted my discussion. Mr. Clovis, Joshua Clovis, from Mon Health was scheduled to be here. He was unable to attend. And so we have been working hand in hand with Mon Health on this issue for years now, actually.
Right, and I just want to get on the record that you own two of the offices in here and they own four.
That's correct.
That you're doing for both and you have their full support. You're not just saying, let's just
That's-
do this for us.
That's
I'm just
absolutely correct.
Getting that on the record.
Yes, I'm sorry. I should have mentioned that. I have the text messages from our
Well, no,
conversation
I-
today to show you if
You
would like
saying
to
it's
see
good
it.
enough. I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that it's said.
Yes. Can I clarify? In the pro district, the maximum height is a 35 foot,
Uh-huh.
and in the B2 is 72 foot.
Okay, and if they build anything else there, it's gonna have to have the landscaping buffer, et cetera, et
Yes.
cetera. So how much, DOH has taken how much footage on the front?
I had all those maps on my desk earlier, but I couldn't tell you the exact footage. But what I can show you, well,
I can zoom into another map here.
their line will, if you could zoom in, that would.
Oops, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Go back to the tax map. Go ahead, I'll get it in position, so. Sorry. There we go.
You're good. So they will be condemning, they will be widening the lane right starting here. We're gonna have to move the entrance over by one spot, and they will actually be taking up to almost the tip of this white line. There may be a possibility for an angled space or two here, but we're not quite sure yet. The engineers haven't quite figured that out. Essentially, though, as they curve or as they widen this lane, this entire front half of the parking lot will be gone.
Okay.
So it's nearly 25% of the parking for the building. And again, that presents, just to reiterate, two issues for us. Number one, the loss of parking in and of itself is a deterrent for many prospective purchasers or tenants. Number two, the fact that that is going to be a construction zone. In the name of progress, in the name of growth, we're happy to see that, but it will be a construction zone for about a year, and that's just really putting a strain on the property.
Okay. Any other?
Does Heritage also own 223? Or 223 next to the one behind that? Isn't that where their office is?
Yes, that's the Heritage Apartments leasing office is located right there. So that is, I actually forget exactly what the zoning is on that, but that is, I think from.
R1A.
That's R1A, okay. So there is a professional office there.
Yeah.
Can you abut B2 to R1A? Okay.
I'll go back to the zoning map. Sorry, just
I want to ask a
clarify.
question that we asked on a couple applications ago. Do we have any updates on when the DOT is considering doing this?
Sorry.
You might know more than we do.
No.
But
2125.
I will say, new surveying stakes appeared within the last few weeks on our parking lots. So if that tells you anything, I don't know exactly what that means, but it means there is some sort of action at the DOT or the DOH. So we haven't been given any exact dates. We actually haven't even been given a formal proposal yet for the deconstruction of the lot and how that's going to work.
Do they already have the right of entry?
No.
Okay. I don't know how they put construction stakes out there, but.
And just clarification, this is R1. R1A is the neighborhood that's directly behind the pro district.
Oh, they do have our permission to do that. I'm sorry,
Okay.
you said right of entry. I was thinking maybe to begin staging for the
Okay.
project. No, that's not to that point yet, but yes, they do have our permission to enter onto the property for the surveys and,
Okay.
and to stake.
So Matt, you're saying that the pro zoning is really making this building obsolete or unmarketable? Both, perhaps.
A little bit of both. It contributes to that, I would say. Back when medical office space was on every corner and you had the family doctor on every corner.
Yeah, I was just thinking that
It's a lonely-
the nature of the business has changed in part because of Vandalia Health.
Well,
Whatever.
that's true. Yes, it's you don't have too many physicians opening up in private practice, and obviously that was the primary tenant for the building, not only for Wedgwood, but you had Dr. Houston's rheumatology office there. That was a
So we
big
consider
market.
consider the market as well, or the
That's
business. It is really zoning it into obsolescence.
That is correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
Any other questions for the applicant or planner?
Thank you for the excellent presentation.
Well, I appreciate your consideration, and one more thing, I'm very appreciative of your consideration for the zoning or the rezoning application for the neighboring property. And I do think that does play into the progress of this whole situation, but again, what I will leave you with is this is an existing asset. This isn't something that we're looking to, build or anything. This is an existing asset that the community is having trouble with. And the longer it sits there, the less the city of Morgantown renders benefit, profit, taxes, anything out of. And again, we would appreciate your favorable consideration on this. And if you have any other questions or anything, you're more than welcome to reach out to me or Mr. Clovis, and happy to answer any questions you have. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Any member of the audience who'd like to speak in favor of the petition? Anyone in opposition?
Trevor Lloyd, 574 Killarney Drive. I'm speaking in opposition of it. However, I would like to open up by saying I've lived on Killarney Drive now for over 15 years. My house was built in 1962 it's a well-built house. I've done a lot of work on it. My opposition is one of principle rather than having anything to do with the owners or how they've conducted business. Like I said, I've been there for 15 years. I've walked to every home game. Even on game day, the property owners have managed that property fantastic. I mean, fantastically. I've never had one complaint about the presentation or the managing of that property. My point on principle is that we are now, I believe it is the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance to provide a buffer between business districts and residential districts. The pro-zoning ordinance in there, I believe, is that intention. It was made for that, to be that buffer, that step down from business, stepping down like a half a step, and then you going into residential. As we've already discussed, it does butt up against R1A. Right across the street, we have apartment buildings, and then a few hundred feet away is single-family homes. The other point that I'd like to make is I have, and as I'm sure a lot of people do, I have no doubt that the owners association and how they conduct that property has every intention of, as the gentleman said, they have a stake in this community, and they have every intention of continuing being good neighbors and high quality property managers. However, it is this governing body not to think of that, but to think of, hey, when we rezone this, the very second that this property changes ownership, the new owners, 10, 20, 30 years from now, though that may not be their intention now, Now you have to deal with a new property owner that has completely different intentions. And what you do here today, has permanent effect for the neighborhood. So those are the 2 points that I'd like to make, and thank you for your time.
Any other member who'd like to speak in opposition to the petition? Okay, staff recommendations, please.
The zoning map amendment request should be evaluated on their land use merits alone. The petitioner's development intentions are extraneous, and the planning commission should consider the request on its merits and land use decision. In conducting such an analysis, the commission should determine if the B2 Service Business District is the appropriate zoning classification for the 2 parcels of land, or the 1 parcel of land, weighing all possible future development and land use scenarios as permitted in the zoning code. Given the location and other potential considerations regarding the subject properties, staff did not provide a recommendation on case RZ 23-03.
Any discussion?
Kind of, as we were going through this, I was looking at the table of permitted land uses that was provided. I think it's on page 50, starts on page 50. And really, when you page 50 in the packet, and when you really look at things that are in the pro district, I mean, I agree that it's the need for private physicians' offices, et cetera. Even dentists have kind of have a different model right now to some degree, are lessened. And there's lots of medical buildings in Morgantown that are consolidated, and there's a lot of space in them. And so I guess what I was thinking is our pro district too restrictive? I know this is more of a comprehensive plan thing, but, for instance, you can't have a bakery there, or you can't have a small restaurant. Those kinds of things are buffer things between compared to, something that could go into, what's the biggest thing that can go into a B2 that you can think of?
Hotel, shopping center, yeah.
So, and so I think if we're thinking of this, and I have the same concerns of a buffer between R1 and whatever, or have we kind of painted ourselves into a corner that's antiquated with the way that we define pro now and what we want as a buffer to a neighborhood? Knowing that right now the R1 that's sitting behind it is something that was more consistent with a pro district, perhaps, and the buildings across the street on Killarney aren't quite what you would expect in R1, but I get it's grandfathered in or whatever.
Bless you.
I'm just, and I don't know if it's the appropriate time to bring this up, but I'm kind of, and not that we're at the point where we know the state is ready to, excavate and pull the land out. And if we're going to go this far down the street, what's next? Are we going to continue down Van Voorst? What's the plan? Because we're, it's not just the intersection, it's the whole street. So, I don't know. I ask more questions than I get answered, or than I should, but.
Well, and they're really good questions, because to me, this is kind of zoning creep, is what it's kind of looking like. And I get it. I get there's an issue with the use of the building in the district that it's currently in. And I get that it may not fit there now. But I have concerns, although B2 does provide greater opportunities to lease it, it also has greater issues in the future. And that's one of the things that concerns me. And Mr. Gutta, I know your family. I know your family's been in town forever. And I know what you guys do. But somebody may walk up to you tomorrow and say, I'll give you $10 million for that. And you're going to take it. And then there's no control over what's going to be there. We got to look at, if we rezone this, it's not rezoning it for you, it's rezoning the land for all future purposes. And that's, and like the gentleman said, Pro is supposed to be a buffer. There is a neighborhood back there. And like Dr. Petro said, maybe we need to look at Pro. Maybe we need to look at some of the uses in Pro. I just have concerns for B2. Any other discussion?
I guess I have when we rezoned those adjacent properties, or we recommended rezoning of the adjacent properties recently, part of my concern was leaving this little Pro island sitting back there by itself, and I was generally not in favor of that. But having really looked at the surrounding neighborhood and having looked at or heard some of the concerns, I do think B2 is a tough thing to put right there. And at the same time, I agree with everything that's been said. I think that Pro is way outdated, and some of the things that we don't allow in there, we would allow other places in some neighborhood districts, and we should be allowing more of those types of land uses, like knowing that, as one of you all said, like a bakery, a small little cafe would not be allowed to go there. In the Pro, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not saying this is the place for a 7-story hotel, but if we were to deny this from becoming a B2 as we just allowed the neighboring property, I do think that it's time to look at some of the permitted uses of the Pro district, or an alternative to the Pro district.
And I will say I wasn't in favor of the other one, but the other properties we looked at also have a buffer behind them to the neighborhood too. So that's, and the reason I wasn't in favor of the other one is because the road's not done yet. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Understood. There was a natural buffer with that little creek there. I totally agree with that. I'm not a fan of the Pro district in general, so if we are to deny this gentleman's request to rezone, we really need to look at some of the permitted land uses for the Pro.
I'll tell you, I think no matter which way we go, I think we need to look at Pro. Because to me, it's more restrictive than even a neighborhood business in R1, which is supposed to be a buffer, but if you allow more type of neighborhood businesses in R1 than a Pro, it's kind of defeats the purpose. But so I think we need to look at Pro. But
So
that's,
the balance we have to strike is to not zone buildings into obsolescence, but at the same time, I think Mr. Wood makes an excellent point that Pro was designed and is intended to be a buffer into those neighborhoods, those well-developed, lovely neighborhoods that are right behind this building. So.
Mr. President, if I may.
Hey, Rick.
sure.
So at the next agenda, there are going to be zoning text amendments coming to the Pro, because we have another gentleman that's dealing with something similar on another part of town that's in the Pro district. So I think we do need to look at that. It's time to look at that going forward. But as you know, in terms of the uses and having input in terms of what could potentially go there, the B1 may be a bridge, potentially. A lot of the uses in the B1 require conditional use, so there is some purview with the community to look at that as an alternative.
Could you give us a synopsis of differences in B1 versus
So, like,
B2, or B1 versus Pro, or just building
sure.
height? And
So
you know,
for
I could
instance,
see the businesses permitted, but as far as the structure, the building height, et cetera, things like that. B1.
I'd have to pull that information up, but in terms of like the uses, for instance, a restaurant, fast food, for instance, permitted in the B2 would be permitted require conditional use permit.
We could build an amphitheater in B2.
Yes.
There we go.
So a lot of the uses that are permitted by right in the B2 are permitted in the B1, but there are some protections in terms of having that conditional use in there as well.
May I make a comment that is interesting? And not argumentative.
If you come to the microphone.
Absolutely. Yeah, not argumentative at all, but this is very interesting. The reason why we did not select B1 and instead had to resort to B2 is because B1 does not even permit a conditional use for office medical space. And in searching for an answer for that, nobody seemed to have an answer for that until I finally narrowed something down from someone who basically said one day many, many years ago, the thought was, we're going to force all the medical offices in one area and different businesses in a different area. And that's why B1 does not permit medical office use even conditionally. And that was a big problem for us. So had that not been the case, we wouldn't have jumped to B2. We would have been very happy with B1, but that kind of forced us up. So that just, again, not an argumentative point, but just from our perspective, that's why we had to resort to that.
But a medical clinic is a conditional use in pro, correct?
Medical clinic, but then you go to medical office, and it's really open to interpretation. It says medical office is not even conditional.
You could build a golf course there, that's permitted.
Build a golf course.
Miniature golf course.
It is not permitted at all. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Director Yeager, did you say that there are some amendments to land use being presented at our next meeting?
Yes, there'll be text amendments coming.
So would it be appropriate to maybe just table this or take no action on this until those amendments are made and then see which zone this best would align with?
And that's one of the things I was gonna ask is medical office within the pro district what we're looking at?
It's
And
not
can it
being,
be?
no, that's not being addressed. That's not being requested.
Okay.
The request is very limited.
Well, so here's what I think. Rather than just looking at pro as limited as to what one person's asking you to do, that we look at it comprehensively
Sure.
as what do we think we need to have in a pro district and why, rather than just saying, okay, one person asked for this, let's do a text amendment and add this. Let's look at pro district as a whole. If you can do that and see what we want and don't want in there, that's a good buffer.
Yeah, it may be compare and contrast B1 and Pro at the same time,
Yeah.
because that'll give us some ideas of what the next level is and what the requirements are gonna be between the two.
We certainly don't want to zone things into obsolescence. I mean, I think that's the, but the problem tonight is we have a specific application in front of us we have to act on. And the conundrum, Matt, of course, is that we've got to think strategically, not tactically.
Absolutely.
And that's where I get stuck on this, because when we talk about protecting neighborhoods, I think that's a block letter law as far as our comprehensive plan goes, and as far as the inclination of this commission as
I think
well.
so.
So, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we forward this application to City Council with the recommendation that it not be enacted, and that is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. You have another shot with City Council, they'll have to act on this finally, but my recommendation stands as a motion. We can't, and I know, I hear the wheels turning, I can hear the squirrels squeaking. We can't dispose of this, right? Would you agree with me? We don't dispose of this application, we forward it with a recommendation to City Council.
We either
Go ahead, Mr. President.
forward it with a recommendation for yes or no, or I would assume we could table it.
I'm happy to consider that, that's not my
But
motion, but I'm happy.
I
to
understand
consider
that, because what I'm thinking, and Matt, I hate to, you guys have been waiting 5 years, right? I hate to say wait another month or two while we look at this. But if we can do something with pro that fits your needs, that fits the community's needs, that still creates the buffer, that might be the ultimate solution. Or we can vote with your motion. You still have a shot with City Council. They may or may not rezone
But
it.
we're still gonna do the work, Pete. We're still gonna do.
But we're still gonna
look
we're still
at it.
gonna go we're still gonna look at the pro district. So, you have a shot with city council, don't know what they're gonna do, but you still may get what you want in the end. With a pro, it depends on whether we table it or whether we have competing motions, whether, a lot of things going on up here now.
I think Mr. Blosser had one.
You already addressed the point I was going to make. I think I'm with you in that I would postpone this until we clarify pro, in the hopes that we could give you what you really need without jeopardizing future development in that area.
Well, and I think we need to look at pro versus B1 too, and kind of compare and contrast. And it may take not next month, it may be the month after till we get through it. I don't know.
But it would be contingent on whether you would be willing to wait, so.
I'm a very patient person. That's fine with me.
Okay, so you wouldn't be upset with us tabling this while we looked at that?
I don't think so, not at all.
Okay. And would you be willing to work with Mr. Yeager to say, here's what we're looking for, here's the kind of things that
Absolutely.
Well, Mr. President, with that discussion, I withdraw my motion, or I amend my motion to tabling the application.
For that, I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Once you lose the Blosser vote, you've lost. So
The Blosser is the controlling block.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Be in touch.
Next item on the agenda is MNS 23-03 Tia Hunt, Tax District 10, Tax Map 41, parcels 177 and 178.
So on the screen, you can see this is the area here. There are two lots now, both are which are non-conforming in terms of land area. And the applicant is proposing to consolidate them, and the applicant is here, so she'll be able to address any questions or concerns about the future use or intent of the minor subdivision application. And this is a picture of the intersection of Weber and Huntington.
Okay.
Steep lot. That's it.
That's all you got?
Yes.
Okay. Petitioner, anything you want to say? Now you got to walk all the way up to the mic.
That's okay.
It's good exercise, right?
Thank you. My name's Tia. I live in Reedsville, 224 Hemlock Lane in Reedsville, West Virginia. And I bought these two lots. They're two skinny lots, and I'd like to make them into one. And I thank you for the approval. I do have a question in the section that says the minimum lot frontage shall be 70 feet. The frontage requirement may be waived for a parcel not fronting on an existing road if the parcel is served by a proper right-of-way. If you look at that lot, Huntington is the address that it lists it as, and according to the regulations, that's the shortest section of the lot. However, that Huntington goes straight down. So in order to have that as the front, I would be having, on the lot. I'm working with an architect, Dolores John, and the idea is to put the house with the front facing Webster, so I don't know what I need to do in regards to that.
Well, it looks like it's 94 feet across Webster, right?
I'm
If you go
sorry?
back.
It's Webster, Huntington.
Yeah, but if you go back to the, Ricky, if you go back to the, so if you look at the survey, if you have to have a 70-foot lot frontage, the two on Huntington would be 80-some feet, which fits. But if you look across Webster, if you can get the address changed to Webster, it's 94.7 feet, so it still meets either way, it meets the requirements.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's not an issue for placing it with the front
It's
facing
not an
Webster?
issue with us. However it's built, that's an issue with them.
At the building permits, as
Yeah.
we kind of discussed offline, but in terms of meeting the requirements or minimum standards for lots, that will certainly meet and exceed it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, all we're doing here is saying it meets the requirements, and then you got to deal with building permit to turn your building around.
All that good stuff. And then I did not know that I needed to get a hold of MUB, but I will take care of that. I've already given Ricky Yeager the 3 copies of the survey, and then I'll take care of the 3rd issue. And there was a note here about a pre-existing non-conforming accessory structure. Apparently it was a children's playhouse or something that was built. It's going, because it's nothing. But I thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Any member of the audience who'd like to speak in favor of the petition? Anyone in opposition? Okay, staff recommendations, please.
Staff recommends approval with the conditions in the packet.
Move for approval, subject to staff conditions.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor? And that looks to be unanimous. I counted you. Okay, next we have committee reports.
Thank you.
We'll be in
Thank you.
touch.
No committee reports, staff comments.
No reports.
Okay, anything for the good of the commission?
An adjournment, that would be.
That would be good, I haven't had dinner yet.
Before I get a parking ticket.
We're adjourned.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.